interested in this very American theology when I was 18 or so, and by 25, I was traveling the country interviewing its celebrities. I spent a decade talking to televangelists with spiritual guarantees for divine money. I interviewed countless megachurch pastors with spectacular hair about how they live their best lives now. I visited with people in hospital waiting rooms and plush offices. I held hands with people in wheelchairs, praying to be cured. I earned my reputation as destroyer of family vacations for always insisting on being dropped off at the fanciest megachurch in town. If there was a river running through the sanctuary, an eagle flying freely in the auditorium, or an enormous spinning golden globe, I was there. When I first started studying this, the whole idea of being blessed wasn't what it is today. It was not, like it is now, an entire line of #blessed home goods. It was not yet a flood of #blessed vanity license plates and t-shirts and neon wall art. I had no idea that blessed would become one of the most common cultural cliches, one of the most used hashtags on Instagram to celebrate barely there bikini shots, as if to say, I am so blessed. Thank you, Jesus, for this body. I had not yet fully grasped the way that the prosperity gospel had become the great civil religion, offering another transcendent account of the core of the American dream. Rather than worshiping the founding of America itself, the prosperity gospel worshiped Americans. It deifies and ritualizes their hungers, their hard work, and moral fiber. Americans believe in a gospel of optimism, and they are their own proof. But despite telling myself, I'm just studying this stuff, I'm nothing like them, when I got my diagnosis, I suddenly understood how deeply invested I was in my own Horatio Alger theology. If you live in this culture, whether you are religious or not, it is extremely difficult to avoid falling into the trap of believing that virtue and success go hand in hand. The more I stared down my diagnosis, the more I recognized that I had my own quiet version of the idea that good things happen to good people. Aren't I good? Aren't I special somehow? I have committed 0 homicides to date. So why is this happening to me? I wanted God to make me good and to reward my faith with just a few shining awards along the way. Okay, like a lot of shining awards. I believed that hardships were only detours on what I was certain would be my long, long life. As is the case with many of us, it's a mindset that served me well. The gospel of success drove me to achieve, to dream big, to abandon fear. It was a mindset that served me well until it didn't, until I was confronted with something I couldn't manage my way out of, until I found myself saying into the phone, but I have a son, because it was all I could think of to say. That was the most difficult moment to accept. The phone call, the walk to the hospital, when I realized that my own personal prosperity gospel had failed me. Anything I thought was good or special about me could not save me. My hard work, my personality, my humor, my perspective. I had to face the fact that my life is built with paper walls, and so is everyone else's. It is a hard thought to accept that we are all a breath away from a problem that could destroy something irreplaceable or alter our lives completely. We know that in life there are befores and afters. I am asked all the time to say that I would never go back or that I've gained so much in perspective. And I tell them no, before was better. A few months after I got sick, I wrote about this and then I sent it off to an editor at the New York Times. In retrospect, taking one of the most vulnerable moments of your life and turning it into an op-ed is not an amazing way to feel less vulnerable. I got thousands of letters and emails. I still get them every day. I think it is because of the questions I asked. I asked, how do you live without quite so many reasons for the bad things that happen? I asked, would it be better to live without outrageous formulas for why people deserve what they get? And what was so funny and so terrible was, of course, I thought I asked people to simmer down on needing an explanation for the bad things that happened. So what did thousands of readers do? Yeah, they wrote to defend the idea that there had to be a reason for what happened to me. And they really want me to understand the reason. People want me to reassure them that my cancer is all part of a plan. A few letters even suggest that it was God's plan that I get cancer so I could help people by writing about it. People are certain it is a test of my character or proof of something terrible I've done. They want me to know, without a doubt, that there is a hidden logic to this seeming chaos. They tell my husband, while I'm still in the hospital, that everything happens for a reason, and then stammer awkwardly when he says, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear the reason my wife is dying. And I get it. We all want reasons. We want formulas to predict whether our hard work will pay off, whether our love and support will always make our partners happy and our kids love us. We want to live in a world in which not 1 ounce of our hard work or our pain or our deepest hopes will be for nothing. We want to live in a world in which nothing is lost. But what I have learned in living with stage 4 cancer is that there is no easy correlation between how hard I try and the length of my life. In the last 3 years, I've experienced more pain and trauma than I ever thought I could survive. I realized the other day that I've had so many abdominal surgeries that I'm on my 5th belly button, and this last one is my least favorite. But at the same time, I've experienced love, so much love. Love I find hard to explain. The other day, I was reading the findings of the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, and yes, there is such a thing. People were interviewed about their brushes with death in all kinds of circumstances: car accidents, labor and delivery, suicides, and many reported the same odd thing: love. I'm sure I would have ignored it if it hadn't reminded me of something I'd experienced, something I felt uncomfortable telling anyone. That when I was sure that I was going to die, I didn't feel angry. I felt loved. It was one of the most surreal things I've experienced. In a time in which I should have felt abandoned by God, I was not reduced to ashes. I felt like I was floating on the love and prayers of all those who hummed around me like worker bees, bringing me notes and socks and flowers and quilts embroidered with words of encouragement. But when they sat beside me, my hand in their hands, my own suffering began to feel like it had revealed to me the suffering of others. I was entering a world of people just like me, people stumbling around in the debris of dreams they thought they were entitled to and plans they didn't realize they had made. It was a feeling of being more connected somehow with other people experiencing the same situation. And that feeling stayed with me for months. In fact, I'd grown so accustomed to it that I started to panic at the prospect of losing it. So I began to ask friends, theologians, historians, nuns I liked, what am I going to do when that loving feeling is gone? And they knew exactly what I was talking about because they'd either experienced it themselves or they'd read about it in great works of Christian theology. And they said, yeah, it'll go. The feelings will go. And there will be no formula for how to get it back. But they offered me this little piece of reassurance, and I clung to it. They said, when the feelings recede like the tides, they will leave an imprint. And they do. And it is not proof of anything. And it is nothing to boast about. It was just a gift. So I can't respond to the thousands of emails I get with my own 5-step plan to divine health and magical floating feelings. I see that the world is jolted by events that are wonderful and terrible, gorgeous and tragic. I can't reconcile the contradiction, except that I am beginning to believe that these opposites do not cancel each other out. Life is so beautiful, and life is so hard. Today, I am doing quite well. The immunotherapy drugs appear to be working, and we are watching and waiting with scans. I hope I will live a long time. I hope I will live long enough to embarrass my son and to watch my husband lose his beautiful hair. And I think I might. But I am learning to live and to love without counting the cost, without reasons and assurances that nothing will be lost. Life will break your heart. And life may take everything you have and everything you hope for. But there is one kind of prosperity gospel that I believe in. I believe that in the darkness, even there will be beauty and there will be love. And every now and then, it will feel like more than enough. Thank you.
Chào đón Samsung Galaxy Note 10, Note 10 Plus đặt trước ngay hôm nay.
Our brain's motivation. Survival of the fittest isn't the fastest or the strongest. Survival of the fittest is the one that is the best fit with their environment. And wherever you look, if you look at bacteria or plants or animals and humans and small businesses and large businesses and corporations and governments or empires, it is adaptability that made the difference between flourishing and extinction. Right now, humans are being beat by bacteria because they are adapting to our most powerful antibiotics. So adaptability is it, and we see it everywhere. The company Netflix, we all know, and that company used to mail videos to people's homes, and they adapted to online streaming. And another company some of us have heard is Blockbuster. And Blockbuster, despite its advantages as an industry giant, didn't adapt. They refused to adapt. And they are fighting extinction while Netflix is flourishing. Some of you may remember the Kodak moment, but that really was just a moment in time, because Kodak didn't adapt. And this is true for humans. The longest study of human development to date, the Grant study, which spanned 70 years. They looked at everything, looks, IQ, wealth. They found, and I quote, that the key ingredient for well-being is the ability to make lemonade out of lemons. So think of your life. Think about times you were successful and times that you failed. How did you adapt? How did you adapt to a new school or a new relationship, to a new boss or a new computer system in your workplace? How did you adapt to the changing nature of your life, your relationships, or even our own aging? So it was adaptability. But then I had to figure out how. How do we adapt? Why do we adapt? When do we adapt? So my journey wasn't over. And thankfully, it was my research and motivation that gave me the answer. If you hang in here, I'm going to walk you through some very eye-opening neuroscience of how our brain works. So when we humans do something that will help us adapt, like sleep, because we can't think, let alone adapt, if we're sleep deprived, we are rewarded. Our brain's motivation centers are lit up with the powerful release of neurochemicals. And that is our reward. We experience a feeling of well-being and joy. And that is our signal to go do that again. Do that activity again. And if we oversleep, we feel lethargic and guilty. Or if we undersleep, we feel tired and irritable. And those are signals not to do that again and to go get our reward.
By a show of hands, how many of you believe you could replicate this image of Brad Pitt with just a pencil and piece of paper? Well, I'm going to show you how to do this. And in so doing, I'm going to give you the skill necessary to become a world-class artist. And it shouldn't take more than about 15 seconds. But before I do that, how many of you believe you could replicate this image of a solid gray square? Every one of us. And if you can make one gray square, you can make 2, 3, 9. Truth of the matter is, if you could make just one gray square, it'd be very difficult to argue that you couldn't make every gray square necessary to replicate the image in its entirety. And there you have it. I've just given you the skill necessary to become a world-class artist. I know what you're thinking. That's not real art. Certainly wouldn't make me a world-class artist. So let me introduce you to Chuck Close. He's one of the highest earning artists in the entire world for decades, and he creates his art using this exact technique. You see, what stands between us and achieving even our most ambitious dreams has far less to do with possessing some magical skill or talent, and far more to do with how we approach problems and make decisions to solve them. And because of the continuous and compounding nature of all those millions of decisions that we face on a regular basis, even a marginal improvement in our process can have a huge impact on our end results. And I'll prove this to you by taking a look at the career of Novak Djokovic. Back in 2004, when he first became a professional tennis player, he was ranked 680th in the world. It wasn't until the end of his third year that he jumped up to be ranked third in the world. He went from making $250,000 a year to $5 million a year in prize money alone, and of course he did this by winning more matches. In 2011, he became the #1 ranked men's tennis player in the world, started earning an average of $14 million a year in prize money alone, and winning a dominating 90% of his matches. Now here's what's really interesting about all of these very impressive statistics. Novak doesn't control any of them. What he does control are all the tiny little decisions that he needs to make correctly along the way in order to move the probability in favor of him achieving these types of results. And we can quantify and track his progress in this area by taking a look at the percentage of points that he wins. Because in tennis, the typical point involves 1 to maybe 3 decisions. I like to refer to this as his decision success rate. So back when he was winning about 49% of the matches he was playing, he was winning about 49% of the points he played. Then to jump up, become #3 in the world, and actually earn $5 million a year for swinging a racket, he had to improve his decision success rate to just 52%. Then to become not just #1, but maybe one of the greatest players to ever play the game, he had to improve his decision success rate to just 55%. And I keep using this word just. I don't want to imply this is easy to do. Clearly it's not. But the type of marginal improvements that I'm talking about are easily achievable by every single one of us in this room. And I'll show you what I mean. From kindergarten all the way through to my high school graduation, yes, that's high school graduation for me, every one of my report cards basically said the same thing. Stephen's a very bright young boy. If only he would just settle down and focus. What they didn't realize was I wanted that even more than they wanted it for me. I just couldn't. And so from kindergarten straight through the second year of college, I was a really consistent C minus student. But then going into my junior year, I'd had enough. I thought, I want to make a change. I'm going to make a marginal adjustment. And I'm going to stop being a spectator in my decision-making and start becoming an active participant. And so that year, instead of pretending again that I would suddenly be able to settle down and focus on things for more than 5 or 10 minutes at a time, I decided to assume I wouldn't. And so if I wanted to achieve the type of outcome that I desired, doing well in school, I was going to actually have to change my approach. And so I made a marginal adjustment. If I would get an assignment, let's say read 5 chapters in a book, I wouldn't think of it as 5 chapters. I wouldn't even think of it as 1 chapter. I would break it down into these tasks that I could achieve that would require me to focus for just 5 or 10 minutes at a time. So maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs, that's it. I would do that. When I was done with those 5 or 10 minutes, I would get up. I'd go shoot some hoops, do a little drawing, maybe play video games for a few minutes. And then I'd come back. Not necessarily to the same assignment, not even necessarily to the same subject, but just to another task that required just 5 to 10 minutes of my attention. From that point forward, all the way through to graduation, I was a straight A student. Dean's List, President's Honor Roll, every semester. I then went on to one of the top graduate programs in the world for finance and economics. Same approach, same results. So then I graduate. I start my career, and I'm thinking, this worked really well for me. You know, you take these big concepts, these complex ideas, these big assignments, you break them down to much more manageable tasks. And then along the way, you make a marginal improvement to the process. You nudge the odds of success in your favor. I'm going to try and do this in my career. So I did. I started out as an exotic derivatives trader at Credit Suisse. It then led me to be global head of currency option trading for Bank of America, global head of emerging markets for AIG International. It helped me deliver top-tier returns as a global macro hedge fund manager for 12 years and to become founder and CIO of 2 award-winning hedge funds. So it gets to 2001, and I'm thinking, this whole idea, it worked really well in school. It's been serving me well as a professional. Why aren't I applying this in my personal life? Like to all those big, ambitious goals I have for myself. So one day, I'm walking to work, and at the time, my commute was a walk from one end of Hyde Park to the other in London. It took me about 45 minutes each way. Hour and a half a day, 7.5 hours a week, 30 hours a month, 360 hours a year when I was awake, aware, basically wasting time, listening to music on my iPod. So on my way home from work that day, I stopped at the store. I picked up the first 33 CDs in the Pimsleur German language program, ripped them and put them onto my iPod. But I didn't stop there. Because the truth of the matter is, I'm an undisciplined person. And I knew that at some point, I'd switch away from the language and go back to the music. So I removed that temptation by removing all of the music. It left me with just one option: listen to the language tapes. So 10 months later, I'd listened to all 99 CDs in the German language program, listened to each one 3 times each. I then went to Berlin for a 16-day intensive German course. When I was done, I invited my wife and kids to meet me. We walked around the city. I spoke German to the Germans. They spoke German back to me. My kids were amazed. I mean, that couldn't close their jaws. But you and I, we know there's actually nothing amazing about what I just done. I made this marginal adjustment to my daily routine, this marginal adjustment to my process. Und jetzt, ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch. And now I can speak some German. And so in that moment, I'm thinking, it's not supposed to be this easy for a guy like me, an old guy, to learn a new language. You're supposed to have to do that when you're a kid. And yet here I had done it, this marginal adjustment. So what other big, ambitious goals I've been holding on to, putting off until retirement, that I could potentially achieve if I just made a marginal adjustment to my routine? So I started doing them. I earned my auto racing license. I learned how to fly a helicopter, did rock climbing, skydiving, and learned how to fly planes aerobatically. Well, if you're like me, back in 2007, you might have the same goal I had. I was just moving back from London. I was about 25 pounds overweight and out of shape, and I wanted to rectify that. So I could go the typical route. You know, I could write a check to a gym I'd never go to, or I could swear to myself that I will never again eat those foods that I love but are doing all the damage. And I knew that going that route rarely results in the outcome you desire. So I decided to become an active participant. And I thought about the habits and passions that I've developed over the course of my life, and I thought, can I make just a marginal adjustment to them so that they work in my favor as opposed to against me? And so I did. I've got this habit where I've been walking an hour and a half a day for the last 7 years. And I've got this passion for being in the outdoors. And so that year, I didn't actually set the New Year's resolution to lose 25 pounds. I set a resolution to hike all 33 trails in the front country of Santa Barbara's mountains. And I'd never been on a hike before in my life. But the truth of the matter is, it's not about the 33 trails. You have to break this big, ambitious goal down into these more manageable decisions, the types of decisions that need to be made correctly along the way in order to improve the odds of achieving the type of outcome you desire. It's not about even one trail. It's about those tiny little decisions, you know, like when you're sitting at your desk, putting in just a little extra time at the end of a day, or you're lying on your couch and you're clicking through the channels on your remote control or scrolling through your Facebook feed. And in that moment, make the decision to put it down. You go put on your hiking clothes. You go walk outside your front door and you shut it behind you. You walk to your car, you get in your car and you drive to the trailhead. You get out of the car at the trailhead and you take 1 step. You take 2 steps, 3 steps. Every one of those steps that I've just described is a tiny little decision that needs to be made correctly along the way in order to achieve the ultimate outcome. Now, when I say I want to hike 33 trails in the front country, people think about the decisions at the top of the mountain. That's not what it's about. Because if you don't make the right decision when you're on the couch, there is no decision that occurs at the top of the mountain. So by the end of the year, I had hiked all 33 trails in the front country. I did them a couple of times each. I even did a few in the back country. I lost the 25 pounds, and I capped the year off by doing the hardest half marathon in the world, the Pier to Peak. In 2009, I got really ambitious. Ambitious for a guy who still to this day cannot settle down and focus on anything for more than 5 or 10 minutes at a time, and that was to read 50 books. But again, it's not about reading 50 books. It's not even about reading 1 book. It's not about reading a chapter, a paragraph, a sentence. It's about that decision when you're sitting at your desk at the end of the day, or when you're lying on the couch, or flicking through your Facebook feed, and you put down the phone. You pick up a book and you read 1 word. If you read 1 word, you'll read 2 words, 3 words. You'll read a sentence, a paragraph, a page, a chapter, a book. You'll read 10 books, 30 books, 50 books. In 2012, I got really ambitious. I set 24 New Year's resolutions. 12 of them were what I call giving resolutions, where I did 12 charitable things that didn't involve writing a check.